welcome to Career Bootcamp 2022. My name is Sarah Scott. I'm going to be moderating today's session called Weighing the Variables of Different Positions. So this is the English session. The French segment is being held simultaneously in a different webinar. So the link is going to be dropped in the chat just in case you would prefer to watch this in French. Before we get started, though, I want to acknowledge that the land on which many of us are viewing this event and which I'm calling in from is the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. Some of you today might be joining us from various different parts of the country, and I want to encourage each of us to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the territory that we're each occupying. Thank you. So a little bit of housekeeping. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and then ask your questions by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can also vote for questions that you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. The questions with the most thumbs up will float up to the top, and those are going to be the ones that we ask of the panel. So let's take a moment to review the learning objectives for today. So after this session, each of you will be able to identify which work values you consider most important, to weigh the essential values against each other to find optimal work arrangements, and to discuss your needs with each manager in order to achieve complete work satisfaction. All right, so today we have 3 panelists, and I want to introduce them a little bit by reading from the screen, and you can see their photo here. So first we have Steph Percival. So after nearly 5 years as one of Canada's free agents, Steph Percival recently joined the Canada Revenue Agency's Research and Innovation Lab as a senior analyst. Steph has been fortunate to experience the public service through a variety of career opportunities in her 13 years as a public servant in policy, communications, human resources, innovation, learning, client service, and more. For her, she's happiest in roles where she can be creative, have autonomy, contribute to a bigger picture, and empower other public servants. So next we have Samantha Moonsammy. So Samantha is Section Head Lead Advisor for Diversity and Inclusion Material Group in National Defense. Samantha has spent over 15 years in the public service working on numerous communications, outreach, and engagement initiatives that focuses on the people side of business. Samantha has been a leader in diversity, inclusion, and equity, always helping to amplify the voices of others and create sustainable change in organizations to build deeper respect and understanding for all humans. Her daily mantra is be the change you wish to see in the world. Awesome. So last but not least, we have Nyla Mitha. So Nyla is a senior conflict resolution practitioner who is passionate about helping people gently stretch out of their comfort zones so they can reach their goals. She began her career in law and has over 15 years of experience in conflict resolution, coaching, and leadership development. She's a certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. Nyla has been published in the Tiny Buddha website and was featured as a leadership expert on the Boulder podcast. So welcome to all 3 of our speakers. So there is more to being successful than making money. Do you know what makes you truly happy? Do you know how to ensure that your work is just one piece of that puzzle? Before we jump in and get started, we're going to ask you to answer a poll question. So I think Marcella is going to launch it, and you're going to have 30 seconds to respond, and then we can review the results together. So the poll question is, does your job fill your cup? And you have answers yes, no, or I never really thought about it. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that.
I'm closing in 5 seconds.
Very cool. So I see that 53% of you, your job does not fill your cup. So we're going to learn more about what to do about that as we go. So each of our panelists has something different to show you, and then we're going to ask them some tough questions. First, we're going to start with Stephanie. So Stephanie is going to go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to everyone for joining us today, and to the Career Bootcamp organizers for another year of stellar events. Before I dive into the tools that I want to share with you today, I want you to take a few seconds to answer a question. So you can either just note it in your head or jot it down on a piece of paper. But my question is, what is your career North Star? Just think about it for a few seconds. So for some of you, the answer might have come like that. And then for others, it's probably a really difficult question to answer. There are so many career opportunities across the public service, and it can be difficult to navigate your way. Even if you have a destination in mind, the path there is rarely linear. I know when I started out in the public service, I could have told you my North Star easily. I would have said, oh, I'm going to work in communications. But now I know through lots of trial and error that I need to follow a more complex set of constellations to arrive at my North Star. So regardless of how brightly that answer shines for you and how easy it came to you, when it comes to your career, I guess what we're here today is to help you see that there are lots of maps and tools to help you along your way. So for me, one of those maps is the career timeline exercise. I spent nearly 5 years of my public service career as a free agent. And as a free agent, I changed roles often. In those 5 years, I took on 5 different assignments. And each time I chose to move on to a new assignment, I was choosing from a wide range of opportunities. Because I was making so many career decisions so frequently, I found myself wanting to get a better sense of what would make a good assignment for me and what wouldn't. When there's a couple of good opportunities knocking on your door, can be really hard to decide what's going to be the right one, and really hard to say no to. So thankfully at the time, I had a really great program lead, and her name was Helen Daniels. And she had a passion and a gift for talent management. And one of the exercises that she shared with the free agent program was a career timeline exercise. And since then, I've used it a number of times to help me make career decisions. So the purpose of this exercise is really to put your past experiences down in a way that lets you identify what your career highs and lows have been and why they register where they do on the timeline. So you'll see that there's just a little example here. Above the line, you put all of your positive career and education experiences. So if you're fairly new to the public service, it doesn't just have to be your public service career points on there. It could be your education, significant projects at school. It could be your high school job experience. So don't get too hung up on it being focused solely on the public service. The higher the dots are on your timeline, the more satisfied you are with that experience. The dotted line in the middle is basically your neutral or baseline, and then any points that you plot below the line are negative career experiences. Same with the positive experiences, the lower the dot, the more negative that experience. So I would like to show you on the next slide just a little bit of what I've plotted out for you. So this is my public service career experience in a timeline, starting in 2008 when I joined the public service in procurement, all the way to now while I'm on maternity leave. And you'll notice a lot of my experiences are above the line. I've been very fortunate, some closer to the line than others. But what you'll really see is looking at this, the line is not linear. So it's not as easy to explain as it looks. And other things to note are like, it's very difficult to extract our work from our personal life. So some of the dips that you see along that timeline aren't necessarily strictly related to the job. They're also related to other things that are happening in my life. So for example, in 2020, I took a new role right before the pandemic started. And so what might have been a career peak for me ended up being a little bit of a dip. And that's largely because like the work stalled and changed very drastically once the pandemic started. So like you can't extract your work experiences from your personal life. And that's why it's really important to dig deeper once you've plotted those points and reflect on why each experience falls where it does on your timeline. So on the next slide, I've added in some more details so that you can get a sense of what that starts to look like when you start to reflect on those career experiences. There's lots of stuff that I could populate here. If I'm doing the exercise, I'm usually doing it on paper because there's something that stimulates my brain between like having a pen and piece of paper in front of me. I would go into a lot more detail than what I've shared here. What I've shared here is really just kind of like a high level to give you a sense of some of the things that start to emerge. What surprised me the first time I did the exercise was really, I thought it was going to be like, oh, I did this specific task. I had this specific like job in this role. And that's the thing that's going to make that a high or a low for me. But actually it's often a lot of the intangibles that come with each role that make it a high or a low. So when I start to boil down some of those plot points, I can find common themes that matter to me. So I can identify that I like roles where I can grow. I like roles where I show leadership. I like to have autonomy in the work that I do. I need to feel connected. I have to feel like I'm having an impact. I want to be part of a healthy work dynamic. And then I can also start to see some things emerge that I don't like. So I do not like to feel undervalued. I don't like it when I'm feeling understimulated. I have a pet peeve for poor leadership. And I have this tendency towards what I call workplace claustrophobia, which is if I don't feel like there's enough like growth potential and stimulation in a job, I feel a little bit stuck. So those are some of the like high level things that start to emerge for me. So then when you take this career timeline exercise, the important part of it is to actually take it and apply what you learn about yourself through that exercise. So yeah, I see somebody commented here, you're on the poor leadership pet peeve. Yeah. So, you know, with any type of learning, it's only good if you apply it. So then what you need to do is take that self-awareness that you've built around what you value at work, what you need, and use it to help you when you're making career decisions. So for me, I've applied it to everything from determining whether or not to apply to a job poster, to asking questions in interviews, to talking to others who've worked with a manager or leader I'm considering going to work for. As a free agent, I even came up with a list of musts or non-negotiables that I worked into my work arrangements with my assignments, because I knew that those were the make or breaks when it came to whether or not it was going to be a good work environment for me. So then you can also apply it to your current position if you're not looking for a new job. So what do you need more of based on this exercise? How would you like to show up differently to make your work feel more valuable to you? So use those insights to generate healthy conversations, even within your own workplace, to help you advocate for and align your work more with your values and needs. So that's the career timeline exercise, and I'm happy to answer questions for on it when we get to the end. And then I am also, I've shared a copy of instructions for this exercise with Career Bootcamp organizers for the resource page as well. So you'll find it there. So there's one other activity that I'd like to show you before we move on to the next presenter. So this is the Wheel of Life exercise. So I won't spend a lot of time on this one. There are a lot of versions of it on the internet if you Google Wheel of Life. But I do think that given how intertwined our work is with our everyday lives, especially these days, having a better sense of your overall life values and your needs at a given moment in time is also really helpful towards steering your careers. For example, like my values and my needs shifted dramatically when I came back from my first maternity leave. And I had to do a lot of this self-awareness work and a lot of this soul searching to figure out why work wasn't meshing for me in the beginning, and kind of realigning my work to what my current situation was really helped me. I was listening serendipitously to an episode of Brene Brown's Unlocking Us the other day, and she had James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, on. And towards the end of the second episode, they were talking about priorities, and a couple of the quotes really resonated in terms of this exercise right here. So one of the things that they were talking about was a quote by Jim Collins, which basically says, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. I think that's so relevant in a world where we are stretching ourselves so thin, especially with, you could take this wheel and add a little dark cloud above it. And that's what we're all operating under right now. So I think that it's really important to stop and check our priorities. The other comment that they made on that podcast was about how the word priority used to be singular. So you used to have a priority. And now we've stretched it to mean priorities. And then we have more, and we add more and more and more priorities into our lives. So what I would encourage you to do with the Wheel of Life exercise is really just to look at your current priorities and think about how your work fulfillment or your work dynamic is aligned to your life as it is either right now or as you'd like it to be, and then think about what you need to change in order to make your work more fulfilling, or to find opportunities that are more fulfilling for you. So this is also included in the resource page. And again, I'll be happy to answer any questions on these towards the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Steph. There's a lot of new thoughts in here. Very exciting. So now we're going to move over to Samantha. Samantha is going to talk to us a little bit about personal development and surrounding yourself with people who lift you higher.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Steph, for that great, inspiring presentation. It's always a nice reminder to re-review our career pathing and the circle, the wheel of life. And I just want to start by acknowledging the poll and how most people said that their job does not fill their cup. So isn't it great to do stuff like that? And you realize like you are not alone. And I think that's the key message of my response here is that, surround yourself with people who will lift you higher. I think that that's been my mantra from a very early on. So I started in the public service in my 20s. I'm now in my 40s. And I would say that the number one thing that's helped fill my cup is the people that I'm surrounded with on a daily basis in my workplace. So with that in mind, I recently helped create a program called Lifting as You Lead Career Mentoring Circles. It was inspired by the leanin.org mentoring circles program, and over 300 public servants from over 40 federal agencies, departments from coast to coast to coast, people came together for these circles. So I actually had a follow-up circle meeting this morning. So the official programming's ended. It was 5 weeks long, but we've decided to keep in touch and meet once a month. And I can just tell you that it's been so rewarding, and everyone has said the same thing. They said, I didn't realize how much I needed this until I got here. And when I see the hundreds and hundreds of you live right now, there's likely someone in this chat right now who could change your life. There's probably a person out there, if you ask the right question, who could help fill your cup in your career. So I think that's the one thing I want to leave you with today, is that there's some amazing people in the federal public service, and you'll likely find them in hubs like the Federal Youth Network and other places like this. And why is that? It's because those people are taking they've decided to invest their time, and they acknowledge, perhaps I'm not getting filled by my cup in my 9 to 5 operational tasks in my work, for whatever reason that might be, but what can I do beyond that operational time and the deliverables with my immediate team to lift myself higher? I think things like the Lifting as You Lead mentorship program, the idea of the free agent program, we have micro mission opportunities in our organization. So when I first came to D&D and they gave me this D&I advisor position, I had no one. I was the only FTE in the office, in a corporate office next to the ADM. And I said, how am I going to do this work alone? All I know is to work with other people. So I built a job description of a micro mission. And guess what? 2 months later, I had like 6 other people working with me from across the federal public service who wanted to advance diversity, inclusion, and belonging in the public service. So, for example, the role that I'm in, like, that's an emerging field. It didn't exist 5 years ago. Now you see D&I job postings all over LinkedIn. So, I want you to think about what really excites you. I didn't know that as a communications professional that I would ever end up having a job as a section head for D&I, but I had set myself up for success to do that over the last 10 plus years. I always cared about the people side of business. I used my communication degree for good use. So I remember I was always on a traditional communications team, but I would get bored really easily. I'm really high performing. I'd be able to finish my tasks really fast. And then I had all this extra free time. So right away, I joined, it was called Interconnects that I said back in the day, like all this sort of like youth networking programs. And honestly, like that was like the highlight of my career. And I still am part of so many committees and advisory groups at work. For me, that's always helped kind of elevate and create that filling my cup. So I would say to everyone, like, really think about what you need. And now I have a family and I have children and a partner and a lot more responsibility. So my time is limited. So for me, thinking about what I can do for the highest return in the shortest amount of time is really like choosing wisely and reflecting like how I want to spend my free time. But I will always make time to connect with people. That's why I like the mentoring circles versus just like a one-on-one mentoring. You see a lot of that in departments, and that's great, but it's harder to find one person you connect with. Whereas the Lifting as You Lead program, you're getting 10 people typically 8 to 10 people at the same time that you have a chance to connect with. So you'll see there's a register here button. So the next cohort will open up in May, and it will be 5 weeks over a 10-week period. So every other week you'll have a chance. And these are the 5 topics. So when we went out to the public servants across the country, these were the kind of topics that were coming up over and over again of what people wanted to learn. But you can go right in there right now. And especially since we're talking about filling your cup with your career, go through the week 1 curriculum and, maybe do it with a colleague or a friend or your partner, and just go through some of the questions there and just start reflecting and having some fun with the content. I really think it's going to help you, just get grounded, similar to some of the coaching that Steph gave. And what I can tell you is that when you make, like for me anyways, when I make time for myself to invest in myself and to surround myself with people who lift me higher, it's so rewarding. So I do hope that, that resonates with you, and that I want you to know that it's not just about your immediate team or your immediate manager to create that joy in your life. Like, it's great if you have that, but from the stats that I just saw, like perhaps you don't, and that's okay too. You will find your way. We do work for one of the biggest organizations in the country, and there's a world of opportunity waiting for you. So I want you to know that, like, we've got your back, we're rooting for you. Like, I'd love to see that you come back a year later and you're like, yes, I did. I am in a place that, lifts me higher. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I'm going to pass it right over to Nyla so we can keep this going.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. What an interesting and rich discussion. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, especially given the poll results. And what Steph shared and what Samantha just shared really, really resonates deeply with me in many ways. And one of the main challenges that I tend to see people facing in this area is that we can sometimes become disconnected from what's truly important to us at work. And this can happen in many different ways. Maybe you've just never given this question any thought. It seems like that's the case, from the polling results. Or perhaps you went down a career track because of external influences. Perhaps you had social pressure or family pressure to do something with your career that doesn't really truly fit with who you are. And it's something that I definitely struggled with early on in my career. This was a question that I grappled with. And right now, I work in the field of conflict resolution, but as you heard, I began my career in law. And I went to law school not because I wanted to become a lawyer, but because I didn't really know what else to do. So I had an undergraduate degree in sociology, and my father was a lawyer with an interesting career. So I thought, why not law? I enjoyed it. I was pretty good at it, but it wasn't my passion. And so interestingly, I only actually realized this after working at several jobs in the legal field, because you don't know what you don't know. And it happened when I was practicing family law. And I had this feeling that I wanted to spend more time helping my clients to navigate through this big transition they were facing. So going from being married to being single, as opposed to giving them legal advice. But it wasn't really what I would call a conscious realization. It was more like this inner tug, like I felt this pull. And at that stage in my career, I decided to ignore it because it didn't fit with my role as a lawyer. And I did not have any idea that I was supposed to be paying attention to those inner tugs or those feelings that you get that tell you, you're on track. This is something that you should be paying attention to. So that's one piece that I think is really important to keep in mind in all of this, is that your body doesn't lie. So your physical sensations in many ways are one of the best tools that you have at your disposal to help you figure out what's on track for you and what's off track for you. Now, when I'm working with my coaching clients, we tackle this question from a variety of different angles, because figuring out what your true desires are can be tricky because we often bury them deep inside of us. And we do this for a reason. Like I said, they may not align with what other people wanted for you. Maybe they're completely different than what you thought you would be doing. So we need to sometimes find ways to bypass that internal resistance to be able to see what's really there inside of you so that you can figure out what's the best path forward. And so thank you for sharing the handout. So that's this is a handout that accompanies the session, and in there you'll be able to get some questions to help you do that. So the questions that are in the handout, it starts by focusing on what you don't like or what shuts you down at work. Because sometimes for some of us, that's the easiest entry point. We're so disconnected from figuring out what we like, but we do know what we don't like. And I think Steph might have mentioned this in what you were sharing, that it became clear to you at a certain point. Yeah, I don't like these types of things in my work environment. And so I won't go through all the questions, please do that on your own. But questions like, what subjects did you dislike at school and why can be helpful. So I didn't like history the way that it was taught to me. It was taught to me, facts and figures versus a story. If it had been told as a story, I would have remembered it. But, so that tells me, if I were to take a job where part of it really required me to remember facts and figures, I'm not going to be a happy camper. I'll probably be miserable in that kind of a job. So yeah, the first few questions are around what shuts you down. And so once you've gone through those, they can give you a really good starting point. And then you can move on, and you might need to scroll down. I'm sorry, the screen is so small. So thinking about what lights you up at work. And so that's really looking at, what activities make you lose track of time. So that's like one of my favorite questions to ask people. So maybe for you, it's organizing things or talking to people at work or creating things like presentations, who knows? But, what are those moments at work? And if you don't have, if you can't think of something at work, what about outside of work? What are the things that make you lose track of time outside of work? So tracking sort of what's your best life or your best career, it's sort of like picking up on these little cool clues that you may have. So yeah, even outside of work, what makes you lose track of time? And then the last, I won't go through all the questions, but the last one on this section or in this section is one of my favorites. And it's one you may need to take like a good chunk of time to just sit with yourself, journal on it, reflect on it, meditate, whatever you need to do. The question is, when you're at the end of your life and you reflect back on it, how do you want to see yourself having contributed to this world? So it's one of my favorite questions because it really directly hits the mark. You know, if you can spend time reflecting on that, that's going to guide you to positions, opportunities that will get you to where you want to go. And now in the handout, there's also a third approach, which is a little bit further down. So that's designed for people, those of you who know what your big career goal is, and you want to sort of dig deeper and figure out how that career goal really aligns with your values and your needs and what's important to you at work, so that you can find different opportunities that might be in line with those things. And so with anyone who finds themselves in that position, you can put your big career goal at the top of that, that part in the handout. I think it was the previous page, actually. Yeah, great. And from there, you're just asking yourself the question, why? Like, why is that important to me? So for me, it was, I want to be a mediator. Why was that important to me? Well, I wanted to help people resolve conflict. And if I kept asking myself the question, why, you know, I wanted to help minimize unnecessary stress in the workplace. I believed that this would make the world a kinder place. And I really want to leave this world better off than how I found it. So being of service to humanity was one of my core values and one of the goals that I have in my career. So the handout goes on then to help you come up with your top values, figure out what you need in the workplace, and even, you know, talk to your boss if you need to have a conversation with them about that. But those are just some of the ways, you know, that you can use to help you figure out what's truly important to you at work and to align your career, your opportunities, what you seek out with that.
Wow, thank you so much, Nyla. That's so wonderful. There's a lot to think about. We've just got a lot of information. I think that we are going to take some questions. We have some pre-planned questions for the panel that we're going to start with. But so this now is your chance to go to the Q&A and ask any questions that you might have. And don't forget to like the ones that you especially like so they can float to the top and we make sure that we can answer them. So the first question that I have is for you, Nyla, actually. So the question is, what if the money is most important to me? You know, what if I just got to pay those bills?
Oh, I love this question so much. Yes, sometimes that's the case. You know, you've got to pay your bills. So perhaps you know what you're really passionate about, but you are maybe set up to work somewhere else. Maybe you studied in a certain area and you need to continue working in that area to pay the bills for financial reasons. That's okay. You know what comes to mind for me with this question is to really not get stuck in the either or trap. So either I must only pay the bills, or, you know, I must sort of not have any money and follow the career that I love. And to really kind of try and put an and in between them. So how can I pay the bills? And how can I maybe still do what I love at the same time? You know, I spent years working in the legal field while I volunteered as a mediator. And it's hard for new mediators to break into the field because no one wants to hire you unless you have experience, and you can't get experience without someone hiring you. So, you know, I decided to volunteer for many, many years as a mediator, and there weren't many junior jobs in the field. And I kind of said to myself at a certain point, well, I love this so much. I just want to do it. I know it's going to help me. If it helps me career-wise, great. But like, I'm just really enjoying this experience. And it was actually that volunteer experience that enabled me to be hired by a conflict resolution firm in Toronto in the private sector. And this was a company that I used to look at their website and sort of fantasize about working there and think, you know, like, I don't have the experience. You know, I'd look at those people and say like I'm nowhere near that level. and they had an opening for a junior person at one point, and it paid off. So what I would say is find a way to do what you love and pay the bills, and you never know where it's going to take you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So we've got another question. This one's for Steph. So what do I do when my values or needs are conflicting?
Oh, it's such a tough one. I think that question kind of goes to the core of that too, because if you need to put the money first, but you all that's not filling your cup in other ways, it's problematic, right? Because you want more joy in your life and you deserve more joy in your life. I think the best thing to do is get curious. And that's what a lot of these activities and exercises are about, right? Is getting curious about yourself, what you want, what you need, what you don't have. And then maybe starting to make your plan about how you're going to get there. If you need to make money. I need to make money. But maybe you want to follow your passion too. Can you take a micro mission? Do you have a manager you feel comfortable talking to about the fact that you want to grow your skill set so that you can gain experience in other areas? I know what Marcella just said is very valid, within the public service. I've seen a lot of people get the experience that they need volunteering with different networks and communities of practice. And that builds your resume. Don't ever be afraid to put something on your resume that it doesn't have to be from your day job. So really just find out what it is that's missing, the missing puzzle piece for you, and make a plan to bridge that gap. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, do it all at once thing. I saw somebody posted in the chat earlier about the atomic habits, about stacking your habits. Start small and just start layering. And every little incremental step that you take will help bring those values and needs in closer alignment.
Thanks, Steph. That's great. So I've got a question for Samantha. When considering a new role, aside for pay, how do I assess if the new one is better than the old one?
I love this question. So I think there's hundreds of people listening right now that are manifesting their next gig, and they're probably thinking about this. So say you're thinking of doing a lateral move, which I highly recommend. It's a great way to get new experience and just get revived again. So back to that poll, a lot of you are not finding that joy in your cup every day. So I think it's time for you to start thinking about, is that something internalized, or is it something situational, organizational that you cannot change? If it is something organizational that you cannot change versus your individual accountability, I think you need to start looking for a new job. So what should you be considering? These are some of the things that I considered as I was doing that, because I've done it many, many times in my career, and so did Steph in a lot of her career timeline too. So one is, what new skills will you develop? So you could be in so for example, I come from a communications background. There's so many different types of jobs in communications, right? There's strategic communications, internal communications, video and multimedia, social media, working for a deputy minister's office, working for an ADM's office. So I just listed out 8 different things. So whether you're an engineer or an admin or an FI, there's so many different industries that you can play in, whether it's a subject matter expertise or it's a type of vocation within your work. So definitely go and start collecting different experiences, because you won't know until you try which one's really going to get you really jazzed up. The next one, which I think is really important, is, does it get you to the leadership table? So I truly believe we're in the times and era that we're in, representation matters. And to me, it doesn't matter if you just started working in the public service a week ago or 20 years ago. If you're not already having a chance to see the light of being at the representation at that leadership table, you need to start thinking about what type of organization you're working in. So you need to be able to and why I say this is because this is where you're going to create change. This is where you're going to have a voice that will help create that change. So for example, for myself, even in my 20s, because I was part of our youth network, I was meeting with the DM and doing briefings in my 20s right away, right? So that was through my volunteer activities. So I think Marcella and Steph and a lot of us who went through that journey, they would say, it didn't matter what my classification or my level was. Like, I was at the leadership table. So I got used to that very early on in my career. And it's something that I officially wanted. And now being a section head and at that table, I'm always looking around the room and seeing who's there, who's not there, and how do we get them there. Another one, like, I mean, I work in diversity and inclusion, so I can't help but say, are you working in an inclusive work environment? Are you working in a psychologically safe work environment where the information is transparent? So transparent business systems, transparent how hiring and promotions are being done. Is it an organization that promotes positive micro behaviors? These are things that we cannot take for granted. So those are things that money cannot buy. When you are in a place like that, so I'm in a place right now where my ADM protects me. I'm in work that is very, it could be seen as very risky, controversial. I know that I can continue to advance this work because I have a leadership team who has my back. Like, this is one of the first times I've really felt it in my career in the public service, and it feels so good. And I want you all to look for that and get that experience, because once you do, like, I'm about to go on parental leave in a few weeks, like, I'm going to go back, like, there's no question, to my organization, because like, I love them so much and they take care of me. And I want you all to feel like, are you taken care of in your workplace? Over.
That's amazing. Thank you. That's inspirational. Goals. But don't mute yourself yet, because I actually have another question for you right away, Samantha. How can I bring up to my manager if my needs are not being met in my role alone?
Whew. So that's a heavy question, because just the way it's written, you're putting a lot of emphasis on your manager. And I would say, very honestly, that's a big risk in your career to put all your onus on one person, for many reasons. One, you don't know what's going on in your manager's life. Like, you don't know how long you'll be with that person. Probably some of the most volatile, psychologically unsafe environments I've been in is when managers changed. And then I didn't, like, so I built a relationship and then they're gone. And then suddenly, like, that the next person in we are not in aligned with the same values. So right away, I want you to always take care of yourself first. So I want you to make sure you're always building a toolkit that doesn't only rely on your manager, because it's very risky, like I said, to focus on that one person. But if you are going to go to your manager, because I do think it's also important to have that open, honest, transparent relationship with your manager, is be ready to have a conversation. And, I would recommend you go to the Lifting as You Lead discussion guides and check out week number 4 on negotiation and how to think communally. Oftentimes, when we think about something we want, it's just like me. But we're public servants. Like, we're here to serve Canadians and to serve our organization. So how do you get in more of a communal thinking that will connect with your manager to help you get what you need, so that you're getting and filling your cup, but you're also taking care of your manager, making them look good to senior management, helping to deliver those operational and people needs at the same time, right? So it's all about a mindset and kind of getting you to that. Like, I learned so much from that negotiation discussion. So I would say that that's really one of the things. The next thing is, come up with a plan or proposal. So I always use my time in that performance management time. So, you get at least 2 times with your manager during the year. Like, I was ready to go. So one of the tips I do is every Friday, I write out my achievements for the week. So big or small, I've got 2 columns of sort of like, very like, simplify things, and then some big milestones that I hit, so that when I'm ready to go and do my PMA, like, it's ready to go. Because guess how many times have you been in that spot and you're like, oh, what did I just do the last 8 months? Like, I can't remember. So I think it's so important to start tracking those things. And then you're also going to be able to identify, like, what were the things that really got me, like, filled my cup and brought me joy. And then what were the things that were just like, oh, like, I can't believe I spent like 80% of my time maybe doing something that you really don't like. So these are all things that then you have the data to back you up when you go to your manager and say, like, look, like, these are the areas I thought I really thrived in. These are the areas that, like, this work didn't really bring me joy. You know, and you can have these sort of courageous conversations. So I think like if you set up your tools for success like this, and once again, I'm putting the pressure back on you. I'm pointing it back at you. Like we do need to take a personal compass and control of our careers. Over.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. I love these suggestions. And we have a question for Nyla. So Nyla, departmental culture plays a huge role in me being satisfied with my role. How can I find out about the inner workings of a different organization?
This is, you know, it's really such a great question and something that you definitely want to pay attention to. So when you're researching departments or interviewing for a job that you'd like, one of the best tools that you have at your disposal is active listening. And what I mean by that is to not be afraid to ask some good questions of people and to really listen to their responses, both what is said and what is not said in their responses. So ask about the corporate culture, you know, and if working with someone who has strong leadership skills is important to you, ask about their leadership style. Really listen to what they say and what they don't say, because what people say tends to be what they focus on. And so if there are elements that they're leaving out, you know, you can ask a second question, but you get a little bit of intel from that as to, you know, what their priorities are. You can even ask to speak to people that are on the team. So not necessarily the person that you're interviewing with, but other people on the team, people who have left the team, you know, other groups that interact with the team to try and get more of a 360-degree view of the workplace and the team culture. And you know, I say all of that, and I really like people to also keep in mind that you are never going to gain 100% certainty that the team will be a right fit for you, because you can't truly know until you're there. So there is an element of risk, you know, when you're shifting into a new role or joining a new workplace, but you can minimize that risk by kind of doing your own due diligence, you know, asking some good questions.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think what we'll do is we'll do one more question from the pre-plan and then we'll go to the Q&A. So I'm gonna throw the last one at Steph. Steph, who can talk me through identifying some of my non-negotiables or some of my wish list?
So I think before you can have a conversation about those things with others, you definitely have to do your homework first, do the reflection and find out what's valuable to you and what you need. I had the advantage of having Nyla as a coach when I was at TBS, and quite frankly, it was amazing to have somebody there who guides you. So coaches, one of the wonderful things about them, if you can access them through your work, is that they don't give you the answers, but they help you find your answers yourself. So if you have access to that, check maybe through your conflict resolution office. That's one great resource that you could use. Mentors are fantastic. I absolutely love this Lifting as You Lead program that Samantha was talking about. So look for all of that stuff. There's a lot of information out there on GC Tools. See what might help you. And then, you know, Samantha also talked about finding those champions, finding those people who are going to help lift you up. They could be your colleagues, like on your team. They could be other public servants that you meet through networks or communities of practice. But create a community around yourself, because it's really like, when I did that for myself, probably back in 2015, it changed my entire public service career. And I can't imagine working as a public servant who doesn't have that anymore, because I think I felt a little lost, like I was floundering before and felt disconnected. So reach out to people you'll find are very, very welcoming and very willing to stand up and have those conversations with you. So don't be shy, and find the allies that are going to help you make those lists and help you find your way.
Thanks so much, Steph. All right, so we're going to go to the live questions. This first question that we have isn't aimed at anyone in particular, so I'll let any of you unmute yourself to answer. So the first question is, it seems like once you have been in one area or a level for a long time, opportunities to advance or change become more difficult to obtain. How can a person advance or change areas in their career if they've been in the same level or same functional area for several years?
I'm happy to start. So I do think we need to take a moment and acknowledge our individual accountability of making that happen. So you made, there was a choice in staying in that one spot and owning that and being like, and then the moment you decide, okay, enough's enough. Like I remember when I said to myself, and I actually had a career coach, and I realized I was at the same level for many, many years. And it was because of all my extracurricular activities. Like I had a very fulfilled and joyful life. But then I realized it was time to do more. And I'll be honest, applying for positions could be a full-time job. Also getting your French language training. So I remember putting in that time. It was like my day went from 9 to 5 and then 5 to 10 p.m. And that was my study time. And that was me, building my portfolio and applying for jobs. But I can tell you by putting in those hours and making it almost like a job and a commitment, I was able to succeed. Like in less than 8 months, I went up 2 levels. And I would also say that to people, like, you don't have to take a linear path. I want you to look at job descriptions that are 2, 3, 4 levels above where you are and start highlighting the things that you don't already have right now and go get the volunteer opportunities or go speak to your management team and say, like, these are the specific things I'm looking for right now. So then guess what? When those positions come up, like, give yourself some time to build those skills, like you'll be able to get to that much quicker. So it's time for that person to like definitely move on.
I'll build on that quickly to say that I think we tend to take a very traditional approach to PMAs, where we think that everything that's on our PMA has to be about our paid role. I would encourage you to talk to your manager about what else you might want to include on there. So for example, I used to co-lead a grassroots network to help public servants transition to remote work after the pandemic. I put the experiences that I was gaining in that grassroots network in my PMA. And my manager counted that. So like, if those are the things that are going to get you the skills and experience that, like Samantha said, you need to get to be able to apply to those job posters, do that. And also think about your learning plan in a different way. So learning doesn't have to be, a Canada School of Public Service course. Like learning could be like taking 5 or 10% of your time to spend doing something that's actually going to help you, like with on the job, like learning, whether it's working with someone else in your office who does a job that you think is really interesting, that you might be good at, to those volunteer efforts and things like that. So think of that stuff in non-traditional ways and how you can build that into your workday, because I do recognize that we're not always in a place in our lives where we can add more and more and more on. We don't always have the bandwidth to be able to say like, okay, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to take this course in my spare time, and I'm going to get this volunteer experience in my spare time. Sometimes we don't have that capacity. So what can you build into your workday that's contributing value? Remember, you're a public servant who works for the public service, not just in your day-to-day job description.
I could just add quickly, one last thing that came to mind for me is, really having a chat with your manager if you feel comfortable, of course, and there's support out there if you need support to have these types of conversations, but really getting down to, what is it that they need to see from you to get to the next level? Like what types of things would you need to be doing day to day? What types of projects, initiatives? I have a colleague who often asks the question when she goes to her performance reviews, what will it take for me to get a succeeded plus, a surpassed? So she's got those really clear indicators from her boss, and that can help lend support in this area as well.
Thank you so much. So the next question is actually for Steph. So Steph, how do I escape workplace claustrophobia? this person is feeling very stuck in their position. They don't see any advancement where they're working right now, but they are also finding it hard to change into different roles as they've been labeled as only doing one thing. Do you have any advice?
Oh, that one gets me in the gut. Can I tell you? I started my career in procurement, and I have a hunch that there are a lot of you who took the first job you were accepted for in government, because that's what you do. You apply to the posters, and when you finally win a competition, you take it. And if you don't get out of that role, it can be really easy to get pigeonholed. And I was terrified of that when I worked in procurement because, I enjoyed my colleagues. I was good at my job, but I was surrounded by people who had been doing the same thing for 30 to 35 years, and I did not want that. And it kind of drove me to keep propelling towards that, what I thought was my North Star at the time. And so I would say, look for any opportunity to get to diversify your experience. So whether that is taking on a micro mission, whether that's applying for assignment opportunities, whether you have the psychological safety in your workplace to be able to have that frank conversation with your manager that your job is not filling your cup and you'd like to try something different. Just make a plan and try to get the experience you need to try something different. And don't be afraid. I saw somebody posted a question earlier about classifications. I've been a CR, an AS, PM, an EC, an IS, an ES now, which I can't even tell you what that stands for. Don't get hung up on job classifications. Just look for good work and good people, and the rest will take care of itself.
Thanks, Steph. That's wonderful. The next question may actually be for you, Steph, as well, but of course, any of you are welcome to chime in. So Emily is asking, as a young public servant, how can you know what your path or timeline is if you don't know what's available?
I'll answer it quickly, but I'm sure that Samantha and Nyla will have some to add on. Get involved. My public service career changed so much once I expanded my bubble. I spent the first 3 years of my career working at D&D in Halifax. And like I said, I was afraid of getting pigeonholed. I moved to the NCR to broaden my horizons. Thankfully, I think we're in a better place where you can actually get more experiences outside of the NCR now than we were 10 years ago when I did that. And I'm back on the East Coast now, so it is possible. But I would just say, I spent 5 years in a bubble at Health Canada when I first moved to Ottawa. I love that department, but I was very insulated from the rest of the public service. And then, it was getting into things like the GCWCC, getting into following what the Federal Youth Network was doing, Leaders GC, which is a community of public servants on Twitter, and then getting involved in any grassroots community or network that appealed to me, really broadened my horizons. And then you start to meet people and you say, oh, you do what? That sounds amazing. And there are so many incredible jobs and so many incredible teams across the public service. But if you don't step your toe out of the bubble that you are in currently, it is really difficult to find out what's out there. So just talk to people. One of my favorite things to do is to schedule a coffee chat a week with somebody that I don't ordinarily connect with. So things like that can really help grow your knowledge of the public service and then help you identify where you want to take your career.
I can add a little bit here as well. I love what Steph just shared. This idea of the coffee chats and really kind of looking at what's out there and who are the people that you might want to speak with, so going to sort of a directory and looking at people's job titles, and if you're what draws you, if you're curious about something, people love talking about their careers. They love sharing, well, how did you end up in this job? Oh, well, let me tell you, those are incredibly fun chats to have. It can lead you to other people. They may connect you with someone else to speak with. And I would say if you're, looking to do this sort of an exercise, it can be really helpful to break it down into teeny tiny steps. This is like one thing that I often encourage my clients to do, because it can seem daunting. It's like you're in your job and you want to be somewhere else, but it feels like you're at the bottom of a mountain looking up and seeing the top of the mountain peak, or maybe just the clouds because you're not sure even what's up there. So what's a teeny tiny step you can take today? Maybe just go on GEDS and take a look at some names, and that's all you do for the day. You do nothing else until the next day. The next day, maybe you send an email, to one person. So breaking it down can really make it a lot easier for people when it seems like it's daunting to embark upon this journey.
Kudos to Steph and Nyla. I think they nailed it with the response. I'm just going to add one more thing. When you're thinking about these coffee chats and connecting, be prepared to know what to ask for. So I'm going to leave you with one thing: mentorship versus sponsorship. Anyone can mentor and spend time with you talking about their careers. And Nyla said, people love to talk about themselves. But where is that going to leave you at the end of that coffee chat? Start thinking about how people can sponsor you and how you can sponsor them. So I want people to know, whether you're an AS1 or an EX4, everyone has an opportunity to lift someone higher. So when you start understanding this concept of sponsoring, then you'll really understand how people can really help take things to the next level for you and really work. But it's a term in the public service that we need to get a bit more familiar with. So private sector, it's really like, it's those referral bonuses, people talking about other people. It's very common. In the public service, it's not as common, but it needs to become, because that's how representation will happen. That's how more diverse views are going to end up at the table. Like, we need to sponsor people in positions when we see gaps. So that's something that, we talk about in Lifting as You Lead. And I learned so much from that conversation. So I think that was week one about mentoring versus sponsoring. So just wanted to plant that in your mind as you start thinking about all of these networking chats, because I think you're all going to be very busy connecting with people. So think about creating those right types of questions. So someone's asking, what is sponsoring? Sponsoring, so the difference, mentoring is just anyone can mentor. They can share their advice about their career, share their stories. Sponsoring is when someone actually, you can only ask someone to sponsor you if they know directly the type of work that you're doing. So say, for example, Steph and I are on the same executive committee, in a horizontal project, and we're working together. Well, then Steph has that direct experience of knowing the type of skills I have. So then she could be a potential sponsor to me. So then, for example, Steph and I can have a conversation. I could say, you know what, I'm looking for this next in my career. She's got that in her mind when, she's out there and, having those conversations, doing her HR strategic planning, all of that, and be like, you know what, Samantha would be a good fit for that, for XYZ. So you can't just ask someone randomly to sponsor you, but all of your managers or senior leaders in your organization could potentially be a sponsor to you. So I want you to start thinking about that, because you need to know how to ask for what you want. No one's going to give you your next dream job. So once you understand the concept of sponsoring, then and also consider how you can sponsor others. This is a 360 movement here. So it's not just about me, take. Think about who's the emerging leaders on your team too. How are you going to lift them higher? How can you create that next SWEP job in your organization? How do you create that SWEP job for marginalized community members or members from our regions? I had a micro mission member from St. John's, Newfoundland. It was amazing that she applied. And now guess what? She has a 1-year assignment in our office. And she's like, wow, I have a dream job. But guess what? She proved herself during the micro mission, and now she's saying that she's got, quote unquote, her dream job. So you need to put yourself out there. You need to ask for what you want, and you need to work. You really have to show your results, because the sponsor is looking for performance and for someone to shine. If they're going to put their voice and their recommendation behind you, it's very important that they feel that 100% trust that they're making the right decision.
Thank you so much to all of you. This is all awesome. Sponsorship is also new to me, but it's very important to me too. both to be sponsored and to sponsor others. All right, so we have another question. The question is, how do you assess an experience when the work was rewarding, but the management was not?
Oh, it's a great question. So the work was rewarding, the management was not, and you're wondering how to assess it. It sounds like there's an assessment in the question in and of itself in some ways. So, you know, one way to tackle this is really to sort of pick those two things apart. So what was it about the job that you found rewarding? Like, why did you love it so much? What were the elements of the tasks that you found so exciting? You know, was it, like I say, interacting with people? Was it the type of work that you were working on? And, you know, to not lose that like element of the experience because of you know, the person who was leading the workplace maybe not being the right fit for you. So it also then gives you some intel around what type of leadership you are looking for. So going back to those great questions that you can ask, you know, coming into a new workplace around leadership style and whatnot. So those are some ways I think you can unpack that type of an experience. Yeah.
I'm not sure if this has to do with the career timeline exercise too. So I'll say like this comes into play when you're weighting those points, when you're plotting them above or below the dotted line in the middle. So you may have loved the work, and if you had an amazing manager, maybe that plot point would have been really high above the line for you. But instead, you're plotting it closer to the neutral baseline or just a little bit above. That's going to come out when you start to add your notes about your reflection. And when you're reflecting, even if it was an overall positive experience, you're going to list everything about it, whether it's positive or negative. So that's going to come out. And then I would say like Nyla was talking about, like, what was it about that manager's style that you didn't like, or the environment that was created there that you didn't like? That is data for you. So when you're going into your job interviews, when you're looking at new positions, use that to ask really smart questions about the leadership style. Because, for example, if part of the reason you didn't like that manager is because they were a micromanager, well, that tells you something. So suss that out in the interview. If it's because the culture was not toxic, well, you know that a psychologically safe work environment is really important to you. So, so coax that out of somebody and get them to talk about their leadership style and how they create a healthy work dynamic. So really use the intel that you generate, positive or negative, to inform your future decisions on what's going to work for you and make a great environment for you.
And to add to what Steph said, I'd like everyone to take a moment to think about being a bit more courageous in the public service. So if you're saying that the job's rewarding, but the management, there's something not right, like, we need to know this. So as you all know, there's a clerk's call to action on inclusion and some bold steps for us to take care of the people side of our organizations. If we don't know what's happening, then we can't fix it. So I would say start documenting those moments of microaggressions or how you're feeling. And in your exit interview, like, share that. So, you know, if you work at Parks Canada, that would be sending it to the president. Or if you're working in an organization like I work at D&D, 4,000 plus people, and I'd send it to my ADM. Like, don't be afraid to use your voice to create change. It's important for us to take a pulse. If everyone just stays quiet, how are we going to make a change? So I think we have a collective responsibility. It is not going to be a career hindrance. It's actually going to show your inclusive leadership style, that you are committed to psychological safety in the workplace. So I would say, like, don't just leave without saying something, because, you know, we all need you. We need each other to help make this public service like better than what we found it in. Over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we have another question from Alice, and I think this might be for Steph, but of course, all three of you can definitely add an answer. So Alice is asking, what are your non-negotiables for an assignment, and what are questions that you would ask before accepting an offer?
Oof. It's so hard because it depends on how much information I already know about the offer. So some of the non-negotiables that I worked into my free agent assignments included things like designing like human-centered design. So for me, it's really important to design with the user and not make assumptions about what's needed. Like really understanding the problem instead of like solutioneering, which is what I call when people come to you with a solution that they want implemented, but we don't know if it's founded, like if it's going to address the root cause. So things like that about the actual work. And then for me, it's things like really around those psychologically safe work environments. So I literally put a line in my free agent assignment agreements about the team works to create a psychologically safe work environment. That was in there. This was back before the pandemic, but I also worked into my agreements that they support a flexible work environment. So things like that. It really just depends on your unique needs. So that's where doing some of the self-reflection exercises can help. When I'm talking to a team that I'm thinking of joining, I ask some of the hard questions about like what work is happening now, where are their roadblocks, like what are the challenges that they face themselves in the organization. I like to talk to the team members and not just the hiring managers, because that helps me to get some other information about how everybody on the team is operating and how they find the leadership style there and the organization itself. And I like to ask things like, what are you doing to create a healthy work environment for your team, and really have those open conversations. I talk a lot about my own needs too, because I don't want a job if it's not going to be a good fit for me. So if I'm not completely open and transparent about what I need, then they might think that they're getting somebody that wouldn't be a great, or that would be a great fit when I wouldn't be. So it's really about how do I create like a really like human, empathetic, and transparent dialogue based on the things that matter to me.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Steph. I'm just pausing in case anyone else wanted to add, but if not, I'll jump to the next question. So the next question is from Christina. Could you provide advice or steps that someone could take to find or move into a more fulfilling role? So specifically for a new public servant who might be feeling stuck, not having a lot of experience yet to progress.
Okay, great. I think there's been so many great ideas that have already come up. Definitely, I think the low-hanging fruit is getting more involved in your organization. So definitely step one, look for those volunteer opportunities with your federal youth networks, your local youth networks, defend all your advisory committees, all of that. Second, try to create some special projects within your role that you can help contribute to a greater cause within your department. So the reason why we were able to create, so the Lifting as You Lead program, it was developed by people who were like from AS1s to EX3s. So it doesn't matter what your classification is. If you're passionate about something, like just go get involved in that project or go start it from scratch. So for example, someone like me, I loved event planning when I first started in the public service. So I planned multiple symposiums, and I'm the host of it's called Ask Me Anything. It's a monthly event for public servants. And I just created that within my department, and then it became something horizontal. So really the sky's the limit. You work for one of the biggest organizations in the country, like just go get it done, like go start, like, so don't just look for what already exists, like also create your own destiny, like within your job, because within you lies the power to do all of this. Over.
I love it. Amazing.
Oh yeah, I can just add a little bit if that's okay. I love what Samantha just shared, and this idea of like going out and getting what you need and asking for it. I so believe in that. I also feel like the first conversation really is a conversation with yourself around what is sort of the type of work that will fulfill you, so going back to what is going to light you up in the workplace. And then once you've nailed that, really kind of then figuring out, well, how do I bring that to life? And so either, through belonging to different committees, through work outside of your team, or through even talking to your manager. If you have a good relationship with your manager, if you're worried about how to have this conversation, reach out for help. You can do that to your informal conflict management team and get some coaching. But brainstorming together with your boss, maybe even around, these are some things that are really interesting to me. What are some opportunities on the team that might be available to me where I can do these things and sort of like engage in these activities that really tend to fuel me at work. So just a few other thoughts there.
Thank you, Nyla. That's wonderful. So next, we have a really interesting question. Much of this, I think this session today seems to be geared towards the younger crew. Do you have any advice for someone who's new to the government, but as a second career? So edging towards the last part of your career, but doesn't quite feel done yet.
So yes, I would say age has no borders. If you're thinking like that, then you're limiting your opportunities. The micro mission example, the woman was actually on her second career. She went back to undergrad in her 40s and she came as a micro mission. So to me, I look at everyone's layer as an opportunity to be your authentic self. Do not let any layers of your identity, from your race, your gender, your age, do not let any of those things limit you, because it doesn't matter. There's nothing else I need to say about that. Just cancel and lift yourself higher.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Samantha.
I'll add on to that quickly because I do agree age has no borders. And I will say we've had a number of free agents, past and present, who are towards the end of their career. And one of the things that they love about free agency is really getting to bring their experiences and perspectives to different teams in government, because they have a lot of knowledge to transfer to people and a lot that they still have left to give. So if you're looking back on your career, maybe you're thinking, what is it that you still want to contribute? Don't limit yourself. And you've built up those experiences outside of the public service. That doesn't mean they're any less valid inside the public service. So what have you learned there that you can transfer here? And everyone can benefit if you're still showing up every day and you still want to contribute. So think about it in those terms.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Awesome. All right, so we have a question for you, Steph, next. In your career timeline, you were able to go from a career low point right to a high point. So without going into any detail, if you're not comfortable with it, how were you able to do so? And did you know that the second opportunity was going to be a high point, or did it take time to realize that?
Great question, and very observant too. So that low for me, it's interesting what comes out in your career timeline. And while the role itself was not a bad role and was probably better than some of my earlier roles that came above the timeline, the thing that dropped that below the negative line for me was the fact that I was pulled back from an assignment that I loved back to my office to a workplace that was toxic. I lost a $10,000 salary increase when I got pulled back into that role. So there was a lot of stuff going on there that created that dip for me. It was a low for me, I felt it in my core. But it also told me, okay, enough is enough, get out. So I applied to a call out for the GCC or GCWCC departmental team at Health Canada. And I thought, oh, why not? Like, and they'll never let me go because they just pulled me back from another assignment. But I wanted to do it. And the ADM champion who interviewed me, we hit it off. She asked me to lead the campaign. And so I ended up finding myself in the very next role leading a departmental GCWCC, which is the workplace charitable campaign for those of you who are not familiar with it. And in that role, I got to be a leader. I got to have creative autonomy over everything I did. I had full trust from my ADM. I had a team behind me. I got to do research into corporate social responsibility campaigns and build like an evidence-based campaign that really engaged employees. And it really is what changed the trajectory of my career, because that's the point in which I got more engaged with everything around me, really built up my network and my connections, really built my confidence. So sometimes it's one person who shows a leap of faith in you who can really change your life. And that opportunity was it for me. So that's kind of the story behind that. So I hope it gives you a little bit of hope that you can hit a low and really not stay there. You can come out of that and you can find something that is perfect for you, that changes the course of your career.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Steph. All right, so the next question I may throw to Nyla, but then of course, everyone else is welcome to chime in. So Nyla, do you have any advice on how to navigate conversations with your manager on sharing your career interests or values and trying to attain new opportunities outside of your role's work in hopes of continued learning and gaining more fulfillment like we've been talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, at the end of the handout that's part of this session, there are some questions to help you prepare to have that kind of a conversation with your boss. The questions that I suggest people really focus on, the main one is like, what's your intention for this conversation? Are you looking for your boss to be a sounding board? Are you looking for opportunities within the team? Are you looking for opportunities outside of the team? Like, really get clarity on that intention. And then once you have that, then you're sort of preparing to invite your boss to have this conversation. So you want to give that some thought, how you're going to introduce the conversation, and to keep in mind that, you have some goals that you're looking to achieve through this conversation. And there's someone on the other side of this conversation with their own interests, needs, and goals. And so how are you going to kind of, I want to say, like, bring them into the mix, essentially, and ask them some questions around, I want to have this conversation about, what I want to do with my career. These are some of the things that are of interest to me. What's important to you? What's important to the team that I need to keep in mind, as we're having this conversation, so that hopefully you can come up with something that's sort of a win-win. So you'll get what you want out of the conversation, and they get something out of the conversation, so that they feel comfortable supporting you and moving forward. But yeah, take a look at that last page of the handout, because there's some questions and some thoughts there that might help you further.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we have another question here. It sounds pretty specific, but a lot of people have liked it. So I think that I'd love to throw it out to one of you. So this person says, I have college, but not a degree. And although I have 20+ years experience, I can't seem to get opportunities. Any suggestions to advance?
Yes, this is a great question. This is a barrier in the public service that needs to change. So I would say all of us that are here who are in a position of leadership, it's time to start changing those SOMCs and getting it changed. What I am seeing though, there's been many, for example, public EX1 postings that have gone out that don't require a university degree anymore and relevant experience. So if we're seeing it already at the EX level, we just need to trickle that down. So I would say in the type of work that I'm doing, I'm advocating for this on a daily basis, that we need to reduce the barriers that exist in the public service for these positions. So if you are in an opportunity to make that change, and also let's advocate more for that as a collective, because it needs to change. It's simple, but we do have a ways to go. Thanks. Great question.
Thank you so much, Samantha. So the next question is, what advice would you give to those of us who have been moving up the ladder quite quickly, more prestigious, complex, visible roles, and who perhaps want to pump the brakes a little bit to focus on other priorities, something like family, without stunting your professional progress? This person feels like there is a pressure to continue with rapid upwards trajectory, but is aware of the perils of this.
So lived experience here, that I would say, when in personal reflection of going through that exact same question in my mind, I realized that it is in my mind, in my mindset, that I want you to know that we work for the federal public service. There is a place for all of us to thrive and grow. And I want you to say, it's okay. It's okay that there's a moment, chapters in your life, kind of like that circle of life that Steph showed us at the beginning. There's going to be different priorities in our life at different times. For me right now, it is family. So I've intentionally not gone too far up the EX cadre on purpose, but I don't think that hurts my career, because the time and fulfillment I get with my family life now is completely precious. And no one's really tracking that but my own goals. And in my management team, they're always asking, like, where do you want to go next? And I tell them, but it's a longer term plan. It's not like something I need to accomplish tomorrow. And I'm okay with that, because my cup is filled in different parts of my life right now. But ask me 10 years ago, it would have been a much different priority. And that's okay. I think that's part of being human. And we need to add that vulnerability to our life to say, like, really the only person who's going to, at the end of the day, have that reflection of fulfillment is yourself. It's not your organization. And what is it? Morgan Freeman started his acting career in his 50s. So I would say, like, there's no like set timeline of like when you're supposed to start something, and let's get that age and expectation just like out the window. Like, just go for joy in your life, and none of this will really be even part of the considerations. Over.
That's wonderful. All right, so I may only be able to do one more question. So the next one that we have in line, based on the likes, is actually kind of goes back to even the title of this. It seemed like a good one to end on. So how do you weigh the pros and cons of several job offers? Hard to know what the management or team will be like after just one interview.
I'll start, and I'll just echo what Steph said. I absolutely love that she added that line about psychological safety into her job description. So why don't you try to be a little courageous in your conversations, and you'll see very quickly what teams are going to really embrace that and what teams are going to kind of like be startled. If they're startled, perhaps they just aren't at that level of EQ to create that psychologically safe, inclusive workplace that will help you thrive. Whereas if you wrote that down, as Steph has done many times, and seen a reaction, like, I think that is like going to be one of like your top indicators of success if you're going into the right team or not. Over.
That's wonderful. Steph or Nyla?
Yeah, I love what Samantha just said. So to me, it really goes back to knowing what your core values are, what you want to get out of your life at work, and then asking the right questions. And this concept of psychological safety is so important. And I know many people are looking for that at work. I think we all are. And, one of the questions that I often get asked is, but I can ask a leader, like, is your team psychologically safe? And they're going to say, yeah, it's great. So how do you trust that? So to really kind of be maybe sometimes a little bit more astute with your questions and ask things that are sometimes more specific. So what's a time where psychological safety was lost on your team, and what did you do as a leader to restore it? That will give you like a really good indication of this leader's like knowledge of psychological safety, how they operate. So spend some time thinking about those questions.
If you hear chaos in the background, my preschooler and my dog and everybody just came home. But I will say it goes back to everything we talked about knowing what it is that you want and what's going to make you happy and fill your cup. So for me, like I've learned over the years that there is this trifecta of like psychologically safe workplace, work that has an impact, and then I like to work for good humans who are also good leaders, if that makes sense. So like I look for that trifecta, but if I had two offers on the table at the same time, and I have that seem to meet that, what I'm really looking for is the connection. So I've moved for the most part beyond like traditional interviews. So for me, having one like regimented interview is not enough information for me to know if I want to go to that team. I want to have a real conversation and know if we're connecting, know if like what I want to bring to the team and the vision that I see bringing to my role is the vision that's going to fit, you know, how they interact with each other, like what that vibe is like. So dig deeper and have more conversations, because I think that will help you to make those decisions between tough choices at the end of the day.
Wonderful. Thank you, all three of you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're at the end of our time. The links for today's resources will be found on the CBC Wiki page. The link has been dropped in the chat and will be dropped again just now. So you can head over right now to the CBC 2022 network event featuring GC's Movers and Shakers on the Wonder.me platform. The link will be dropped in the chat space as well. Also, be sure to check out tomorrow's segments, starting with Nurturing Your Professional Support System at 11 Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.